Hello and welcome to Clamp, the weekly podcast where we talk about all things related to creating, living, and making. I'm Grant Alexander, and joining me as always is Adam Mackey and Morley Kurt. Tonight we have a special guest. She's someone who ensures her rope is never straight, and she's always making her way. She works with numbers by day and uses a miter saw at face level in the evenings. Welcome, Christy from Twisted Twine Woodworking.
Thank you very much. That's a pretty good introduction there. Thank you very much for that, there, Grant.
Well, I worked on that. At least a couple hours of work on that one. I was even typing it. I was making changes right up to the last minute. So, well, welcome. Why don't you tell all of our listeners who don't know who you are and what you do and all that fun stuff.
Yeah, well, I'm Christy. I'm in the Midwest here in the United States. And I mainly do woodworking, but I've kind of explored over the last few years into a little bit of leather work and just kind of tried my hand at a few different other things besides woodworking. But that's, where my heart is because, I like to make projects that are special, and I know we all like making special projects, but I'm really drawn to projects that have a story, that have kind of a connection. I don't sell anything. I'm really a hobbyist, but it's been a fantastic outlook or an outlet for me because, yes, I'm an accountant by day, and that's, just so much excitement right there.
Well, we wanted to have you on for that exact reason that you're talking about. You like to make things, not just make things that are special, but the specialness oftentimes in the projects that you do comes from the materials that you use. And so we wanted to talk to you about how you find materials and what the stories are and why those things are important. And at the same time, we might also, talk a little bit about some projects we've done that had interesting stories as well.
That sounds perfect.
So I thought maybe I'd start with you. And what makes I know you work a lot with barnwood. Where did you get and why? Where did you get it and why?
Yeah, I actually kind of stumbled into all of this. I was raised on a farm. My grandfather, my great grandfather, were 100 years on that farm in central Missouri, and my dad was literally born and raised on the farm. He still lives in the exact same house that he was born in, 75 years ago. So as he was growing up, they were cutting down trees, milling the wood into boards, building sheds, building barns, building things all over the farm. And over time, that just starts to wear down. And a few years ago, one of the barnwoods were starting to come down. And I'm like, that material has been in my family for, 75 to 100 years. I kind of feel like I should at least try to make something with it. And I had never made anything, especially nothing, wooden. So I'm like, surely I could put together a hall table or something to kind of, carry that material into the house, into my house, away from the farm. So that's kind of how I literally stumbled into the maker community and into making things.
Do you remember, so you started making things with this barnwood, but I feel like that's almost a separate thing from getting into like the online maker community. So do you remember what was your first entrance point into that online community?
It was the Making It podcast. Because I made that first table without falling into the maker community at all. Or I'm sorry, the first project, not the first podcast. I made the first project just based on some pictures off of Pinterest and just totally winging it. And then a friend of mine just randomly on Facebook had posted that he was working on a project while listening to the Making It podcast. And I was like, okay, well, that's kind of right down my alley. Maybe I'll kind of check that out. And so, Jimmy and Dave and Bob, they were really my introduction into the maker community. And it just so happened to be about the time when Jimmy was offering classes at his house or at his barn there, the woodworking classes and the metalworking classes. And I was at the point where my kids were older. I mean, I'm an empty nester. And I'm like, now's my time for me. I can focus on stuff that I want to do and stuff that I enjoy. And so I booked a ticket to go out to New York and spend a long weekend with total strangers. And my family thought I had absolutely, lost my mind, because they're like, now make sure you keep us posted and make sure your Snapchat has your little map on it so we can literally peg exactly where you're at the entire time, because, they didn't know, Jimmy or Taylor or any of the rest of the folks that were out there. And I hadn't either. I mean, I didn't know them at all. So it really was just happenstance that I ran into that wonderful opportunity to really meet people in person and learn and kind of kick off my making all at the same time.
That's cool. I was listening to Jesse Ueda on Maker's Waffle, which I think is one of the best podcast episodes I've ever listened to. It was like 5 hours and it was really good. I would highly recommend that episode. And she had like a similar story of like, I think she had already been involved in the online maker community, but one of her first like real interactions being like forging at Steve's with Al and all of these people who went to Maker Central. And it's interesting that like that as a first experience must have been like incredible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she was at Jimmy's. Just so happened in May of 2019, whenever I was there for that class, and I had followed, or I'd started to follow Brett and Jimmy and Jesse on social media a little bit ahead of time. So I was taken aback a little bit, because it was kind of surreal that within just a matter of a few months I was there and learning from them and getting to interact, with them. It was just it was such an amazing opportunity, because it was there was only about 7 or 8 of us students. So we really did have hands-on learning, especially for me being, such a rookie at everything.
When you were making this stuff, did you bring any of your barnwood so that you could have a story within a story within a story?
When I went out there, I didn't take anything with me, because I was, I was so new to it, but I brought stuff back. And I wish I would have taken an extra suitcase, because I didn't realize there was a whole lot of extra material that they were just handing out to everybody that we had left over from the class. But I brought back as much as I can, or as much as I could. And I've used those pieces from that first class at Jimmy's. I've used them for a maker's camp where we had a project exchange, and then one of the other swaps, the Fools with Tools treasure trade swap. So there's been a few opportunities where I've actually used some of those pieces of cherry or sycamore from Jimmy's and incorporated them with materials from here in Missouri to kind of go full circle on my story, and then gift it to somebody else to kind of help incorporate into their story a little bit.
When you're doing this, why, like, what is the like why behind it? Why is it so important to you to have a story in the material?
I think it's just because that's my nature. That's a good question, because, and maybe it's just growing up with so much history, so much family history around me my entire life. And I know that I am not a high quality maker. I know my projects are not, I'm not doing fine woodworking. I appreciate the fact that I'm not doing that. So I want to make sure what I'm making for somebody, what I'm giving them, is a part of me. or a part of something that's important to them, even though it might not have the perfect miters, it might not have the perfect edges or whatever. I want them to have a connection with me or a connection to that specific piece. That's more important to me than anything, because I think, when each of us walk through our houses or our apartments or whatever, and we look around at things that we've received from each other, whether it's a coaster that Jacob made for the Mozzie group, or one of the other various trades that we've made. Exactly. Those pieces, they catch our eye, don't they? I mean, it's something that reminds us of a good group of friends. It reminds us of a good time that we had. Or, when you guys got to go to Austin's for high caliber camp. I mean, that has to make you smile or chuckle, or, kind of give you that extra tinge of feeling, that connection, just when you see those kind of things. So that's what I want. I want to make someone smile or have a good memory or have a good connection to something.
That's awesome. I think it's very easy to fall into making things with very little connection, with building a very small connection to them, especially like in 2022 when it's very easy to buy supplies on Amazon, and like every maker video is inundated with generic Amazon links in the description. And I feel like there's a sort of push to make things that anyone could do, no matter where they live, if they can order the right things online. And yeah, I think there's a few things that I've done that have had a story behind the material. I don't know if I've put much thought in my own projects in the material being that important as much as like the process and the product itself. But it does add like a really amazing element and makes you treasure that thing a lot more.
Right. Exactly.
And I feel like that feeling is why I keep materials and never end up using them, because I'm so afraid. Like, I have materials with a story, with a connection, are finite. I can go anywhere. I can go, if I want a walnut table, I can go to the store. I can buy all the walnut in the world, right? But if I want walnut from the tree that was in my backyard growing up, there's a finite amount of that wood.
Yes.
And I don't know what I'll ever do with it. And probably nothing. And then one day I'll go, why didn't I make something?
Yeah. And that's a struggle. I mean, because I've run into that with various projects too. And it's just something I've kind of just had to accept, the fact that, like the cherry and the sycamore from Jimmy's from 2019, I think I've used almost all of that. But I've added it to gifts that I feel the recipient appreciated. So I'm okay with sharing it in that respect. But I am a hoarder. I mean, I'll be the first to admit that I want to, I will always think, oh, but there's something later that might be a better idea or a better opportunity. But I've just I just have to accept the fact that it's okay to go ahead and use it now, because you don't know if the next opportunity is going to come up. So you might as well enjoy and, just put it out there.
Yeah. Life is short. And I mean, I think that's another good reason too, to not have to feel too bad about hoarding things unless like you don't have the space, the money, or you're really screwing over your descendants.
Yeah.
You got to make sure it's like relatively figured out by the time you're expecting to die.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's been interesting over the last, the last year since Marvin and I have gotten married, and putting two houses into one house, as to what stays and what doesn't stay. But it's whatever has the family history or the family connection, it always gets the priority over something we might have bought from wherever. And, a few months ago, Marvin's aunt had passed away, and I got the best compliment from his cousin Marvin's uncle worked at the bank, was president of the bank, and that was always a very big part of their family. And so he had a large desk that, they're at the bank. And so they asked Marvin if he would like to have the desk, since both aunt and uncle had passed away. So he went ahead and took the desk. But the cousin had mentioned to me, she's like, over time, if the desk does not serve a function as a desk, or you'd like to repurpose it in any way, don't feel like you have to leave it as a desk. We are completely comfortable with you repurposing that desk as something else. And that was such a huge, I was just blown away, because I know that as a desk, that was an important piece of their family history, of our family history now. And I was just so touched that they entrusted me with that it's okay to repurpose.
I really wish someone had ever told me this, because I have such a hard time. When my mother was adopted, and when her adoptive parents passed away, all the adoptive family fought over this dining room set, and my mother ended up getting it. And it basically splintered the adoptive family. When my mother got divorced, she took it and it went into storage. And then when she finally got a house, the house didn't have room for this dining room set. Like, it just physically wouldn't fit into this house anymore. And she basically gave it away. And I don't know what, like, because she asked, like, does anyone want it? And everyone's like, I don't know. Like, it's a really big dining room set. Like, it's not easy to fit into anyone's room. And everyone's already got dining room sets. Like, it's 100-year-old white oak, stained black white oak dining room set. And I wish, like, instead of it going to some stranger they could have just thrown in the garbage for all I know.
Yeah.
I wish I'd just said, I'll take it and I'll turn it into something. I'll make a coffee table for you. I'll do something out of it. Instead, it's gone. I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, there's a fine line, right? It's the Fight Club quote: "The things you own end up owning you." And that's kind of like where I find myself feeling in this conversation is, I can find it frustrating feeling like I have an obligation to hold on to something because of like, there's a certain should to it. Like, oh, I should have this, or like, and then I feel weighed down, which is an unpleasant feeling. So there's that. And then there's also I wish I never threw away that toy as a child, or like my childhood desk. I really wish I still had that. I feel like part of it might just be like maintaining a healthy relationship with your possessions in general. I don't know if you guys feel this, but I always feel like very okay with throwing away something I've made. And the people around me are like, you're just going to get rid of that? I'm like, yeah, I already made it. I'm kind of done with it. I don't want it anymore. I'll give it away or sell it or whatever else.
Yeah, I felt the same way when we were in the Discord talking about thumbnails for the videos, and everyone's like, oh, just retake that picture of all those rattles you made. And because I had them like laid out 5 different baby rattles I made. I was like, but I took it just like on the counter as a like throwaway picture, not an actual trying to be a thumbnail picture. And people were like, well, just retake it. I'm like, I don't have that stuff. Like, I don't need to keep every practice piece of woodworking I've ever done. If I did that, it's already enough of a stack of stuff. I don't even need any more, but I don't know. Yeah. It's weird.
It's fun being in the woodworking class and like seeing the kids take home their not so perfect projects. And like, they're so airheaded in leaving their things around, right? Like they'll almost forget to take home the thing they just spent 8 weeks making. And I'll have to remind them, remember to take home your stool that you just built. Because I think about like the toolbox that I made at camp, which I still have. And it's like, it's not terrible, but it's rough. It's very rough. But I think it is one of the things that I would find really hard just getting rid of, because I've had it for long enough. And then it's like the sunk cost fallacy. The longer you have it, the harder it is to get rid of.
Yeah, because even like this little, one of my daughters made it, and it's a cleaned out soup can and painted with a picture of me and my girls on it with a little ribbon around the top and bottom. So I'm assuming it was some form of, oh, I love you, Anna, 2003. So it's pushing 20 years ago. But yeah, I mean, I still have these kind of things because yeah, I am a hoarder.
And that's
okay.
Well, and that captures a moment in time much stronger than like the perfect wood turned pencil cup ever would. Like it's almost like the more imperfect something is, the more memories that it brings up, like a photo.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like the perfectly posed mafia family photo at the wedding with 20 people. Like it might be a nice photo, but is it going to bring up as much memories as like so-and-so aunt getting drunk next to your brother-in-law?
Right.
Yeah. Well, Adam, you've been really quiet this time.
I'm here.
Do you have any projects where you felt the material choice had meaning to it?
Not really. I've been quiet because I don't really have much to add. I'm not really that sentimental. I'm the opposite when it comes to materials and stuff. Like I never think about where it comes from or anything like that. Like I made a chair out of a old bed that was my wife's nan's, but like it didn't mean anything to me. It was just repurposing the material. I don't think I've ever really made something where I think, oh, this is from this, and that means something.
And I think you are similar to me in a way, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's like for you, the enjoyment of making comes out of the process itself. Like no matter what the material is, you like the process, and that's why you do it.
Yeah, exactly. I have so much wood downstairs and I'm about to throw in the bin or burn. And even my wife said, like, you're never going to use it. You're just going to buy new wood every time, which I do. So like I have all this wood that I think I'm going to use, and I have no use for it. And I always end up buying something else, unless it's something like I've got a slab down there that I'm going to make a desk out of. But like I have scraps of like decking and stuff that I'm never going to use.
Yeah, all that pressure treated 2x4s that are like impossible to find a use for, that are like 9 inches long.
Yeah.
Well,
that almost became my day 6 video when Grant was pushing me to continue to another day, even though I had like negative time. And I was like, okay, maybe I'll take all these. Oh, sorry, I just hit my mic. Maybe I'll take all of these random scraps that are ugly and staple them to a board and burn them. So it'll be this like cool textured burned board, and then 3D print like my logo to put on stilts to hold it up above. And it'll be this like really cool sign. And I think it would be a cool project, but like even that, even if something is a simple project in your head, once you actually sit down and start doing it, it's like immediately this is more steps than I anticipated.
Yeah.
Yeah, and especially because with small pieces, like once I've done a couple Intarsia pieces, that once you either turn pens or do anything Intarsia, it is really hard to get rid of small pieces, because in both cases you could really put some small pieces to really good use.
Sorry, what was that word? Intarsia?
Yeah. Laughing Mantis. I don't know if you've ever seen his work. It's where they incorporate all of the different types of wood to make the picture, but don't stain the wood.
Oh, I've never heard of that
like
before.
pixel art. Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's also
Is it a knitting technique? Oh no, it's a thing in knitting and wood inlaying. I've never heard that word before, but it's beautiful.
Yeah, when I had made the rose, gosh, it's been a while. When I made the rose out of, barnwood and walnut and oak and all the different pieces, the wall art, I did not realize that was called Intarsia until someone I just had a stencil and cut some pieces of wood and I just kind of, put it together. And they're like, oh, that's really cool, Intarsia. And I'm like, I have no idea what that word means. And then I looked it up. I was like, oh, well, I guess it's kind of a form of that. But there are those that, like I said, Laughing Mantis does an amazing job, especially in the movie scene type, Star Wars and those type of things. It's just amazing, and little itty bitty pieces.
Yeah, it's like paint by numbers.
It's really hard to Google something when you don't know what the name of it is. I've come across that
Yeah.
many times in projects where I'm like, this is what I call it. Let me Google it to see if there's any synonyms, and I can like go down the search result rabbit hole of finding all the different things that people call this thing.
Yeah.
I wonder if we had an episode where we had a whole chat about the lingo. I don't know, maybe. That would have been good to bring up then.
I find it hard to throw out pieces of wood that are expensive. Like not expensive in like the sense of like ebony wood or something, but like if I have like a nice hardwood and it's just a little strip of it, I find it really hard to throw it out. Mm-hmm. I'm like, I could use it for something somewhere, but I never will.
Just make cutting boards.
Yeah, sure. I do have 2 lathes. I don't use them up.
So Morley mentioned something. He mentioned 3D printing. And this is something where I really feel like 3D printing is the opposite of everything we're talking about. Because you literally buy a spool of material and plastic poop it all over the place to make something. And I was wondering, what are your thoughts, Christy, first on 3D printing and whether or not there can be a story in that material?
Oh, I definitely think you can incorporate that into anything with the story. And as the Discord and the folks in the Discord have shown me that 3D printing is not the 3D print. It's shown me that 3D printing is so much more functional as far as making things than I ever thought before, because you could use it to frame up something or use it for the structural purpose, or just to kind of give that that different look, because not everything on a project has to be all wood or all metal. I mean, you can incorporate accents that are 3D printed. I mean, I think of Dean's dinosaur skull. I mean, that was just the coolest looking thing. And then even Morley and his plant holders, or the little plant pots. There's it's not just, I guess, just added pieces. They can really be very functional, and you can incorporate, whether it's some leather or wood or something metal into it. I just kind of see it as it could all kind of work together, even if not 100% of the project has a specific story behind it.
Yeah. And I mean, the material itself is only like one little part of it, depending on how like granular you want to get. Like wood is all just lignum and cellulose glued together, in the same way that a 3D print is made of a spool of plastic. But the story in the 3D print is about like the design process and the hours of printing and troubleshooting bed adhesion issues and finishing and sanding it together, in the same way as like barnwood. I feel like in some ways, I just think it depends on how you want to look at the value of something. I mean, I have my like 3D printed puzzle box that I made over here, and I spent like, I think multiple weeks like designing and printing parts for that. And like the lid would just not adhere to the bed. Like it took like 6 tries to print the lid, and the last one still wasn't even perfect. And I was like, fuck it. It's good enough at this point. It works. And I'll just photograph the good side. And
you do that all the time.
Yeah. I mean, I remember, I remember so vividly, like the first time I saw 3D prints and just looking at them up close and staring at them and being like, this is amazing. And actually in some ways, just seeing the layer lines to me was the story, because you can see how the thing was made, in the same way of like seeing saw marks on a piece of big old lumber.
I think Grant's really showed me the possibilities of a 3D printer. Like for one hand, he's printing bits of track for a Hot Wheels track, and the other hand, he's printing things to help him make a leather pouch for his harmonica.
Yeah. Yeah, the one thing I was kind of curious, if I ever get a 3D printer, I would like to replicate my grandmother's handwriting, like a note where she had written, because she always sent us birthday cards. Everybody always got a birthday card. And the idea of 3D printing her message and then emboss that into a piece of leather. I think there's just so many ways that you could use that and put a story into leather just by using, a 3D printer to replicate grandma's handwriting or a message, that she left for you.
So as someone with a handwritten logo, I can tell you that it's doable. It looks really cool. You just have to make it big enough so that your slicer recognizes the very thin slanting handwriting as something that it can actually print. That's what I feel like is one of the major downsides to 3D printing is the resolution. Because once you want to start doing things that detailed, a nozzle, or at least like the stock nozzle that might come with your 3D printer is kind of big for things like that. But if you make it big enough, it's definitely doable. And that's something I wanted to explore recently is like, is there a way to tell my slicer that like, just make this very thin element a single extrusion and don't worry about like trying to figure it out. Like if there's an object there, just make it. This is like a very deep cut for 3D printing. But if anyone has tried to do that with a 3D printer, they know what I'm talking about.
It really goes into the other point that I wanted to make. And then I feel like with me, like we're talking about sentiment with the material, but for me, the sentiment more comes from just what the object is, like what the finished project is. Like this TARDIS that I'm making for my mate, like the sentiment there is the TARDIS for him, not the materials I used to make it. And I think that's where the 3D printer can come in with like, say, the handwriting. The sentiment is the finished project, not the materials that you used.
Right.
Right.
I'm with you. I just wondered if we went down this path that somehow plastic could become the material that had a story in it. Back in the day, this dinosaur was oil, and then
if you got into the process of creating your own filament,
then
you could melt down like an old dinosaur and make your own filament to make something. So there is something there, and that would be the same process of going through from an old barn to making all the material ready to use yourself.
That would be kind of cool. Take my old toys and turn them into filament to make new toys for my son that he actually wants to play with.
That'd be pretty cool, yeah.
And that's a whole subculture. It's like people who are into plastic recycling and make their own filament. I have heard that it's really difficult to do on a small scale because like you're basically trying to do an industrial process in a home setting. So getting it consistent enough is pretty tricky unless you're doing like really big filament.
Surely there'll be something made eventually where you can do it. Like that's got to be the next step for 3D printers, right? How to make your own filament.
Oh no, it exists. Yeah,
it'll be more like a commercially available, Mr.
like
Fusion on the back of a DeLorean available thing where you just throw a bunch of garbage in it.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, does anyone have any more thoughts they want to share about materials and sentiment before we move on?
I think mainly it's like I don't know if I really have the experience of making things out of really sentimental materials to speak to it of like from a level of like why it's important. But it is something that I would like to try more. And I just think about like living away from my childhood home and the things that I no longer have access to makes me a little sad. Like a lot of things, were kind of like lost in that move. But it is something I kind of envy of you, Christy, is that like you still have access to all of these things from your childhood that you can.
Even if it's not the long-term history, it could be something more current. Like Morley, you and Eden, as far as, something from an early date or when you guys got engaged or something like that, whether it be, I mean, it just could be any number of things along the way that you guys have picked up. Because like when Marvin and I started dating, he went to Canada on a fishing trip, and he brought back this, this piece of branch, that driftwood branch, and we still kind of chuckle when we look at that setting out on the back deck underneath the side table, because that was that him being gone for that time after we started dating was a huge step in our relationship. So I think whether it's somebody's looking back, oh, generations ago, I'm using something new again, but it can also be something more recent and new. It doesn't have to be an old piece of material or an old supply. It could be something that's important to you now, and that you look forward, kids, grandkids. I know you don't want to be thinking about grandkids when you're still in your 20s, but it's something that they might appreciate down the line and be like, yeah, grandma and grandpa, when they started dating, this was, something that they did or saw or used back in the day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I can also kind of look down on like kitschy souvenirs as sort of like wasteful, just like unnecessary. Like, why would I spend $10 on like a keychain from a gift store? But I guess those are the objects that sort of do live on with a story.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm looking around my room now and I'm like, yeah, we definitely have some of those things. I don't think about them very often.
And it's like incorporating them into and using them a different way, I think, is the more interesting part. Mm-hmm. Like just framing something isn't very interesting, but as you know, like a framed leather patch just sits on the floor. Well, unless anyone has anything else, I'll move on to thanking our patrons. I want to thank our F-Clamp level, which is our highest level. It is available only to a select few people, and there's a couple spots still open. The F-Clamp level is Brent Jarvis from Clean Cut Woodworking, Vincent Ferrari from the Because We Make podcast, and Austin from the High Caliber Craftsman. So those are our 3 F-Clamp levels, but they get access to everything. And everyone else gets access to a pre-show and an after-show. What we do, the pre-show is about 10 to 15 minutes. The after-show is about 10 minutes. They're usually, actually, the pre-show has been the one that's been more interesting in the last couple times. But the after-show is where we like to share the secret stuff. So got to listen to both. And every patron gets a free keychain made by Morley. And you can find all the details about that at patreon.com/clamp. If you don't like Patreon, hit us up and we can hook you up with other means of supporting us. If you don't want to support us financially, I completely understand that as well. We appreciate if you could share the show, share it up on your Instagram stories, email it around to all your friends. Whatever you want, tell your friends about it. Say you're listening to it while you're making something, and then we might get a new listener like Christy. Yeah, we appreciate that. And you can also leave a review or a rating on your favorite podcast player. And on that note, let's go into Clampmendations.
Clampmendations. My Clampmendation is Birchtold Design Build. Sorry. Nick made me the most amazing Twisted Twine mallet. And he was a guest on our podcast in last fall. And so he sent me this amazing mallet. And his work is just next level amazing on the CNC. And so I definitely suggest that that people go and follow Nick from Birchtold Design Build, because, hey, how many people CNC a fetus and encapsulate it in epoxy and attach it to the back of a tattoo parlor chair. I mean,
that's some multi-material. Yeah.
It's amazing. Yes.
What a plug. Go watch the guy that made a fetus.
Yeah.
CNC to fetus.
That awesome. Mallet though, that's insane. So was that mallet, did you say that was done on the lathe or the CNC?
CNC. Mm-hmm. It's oak
so it's like
and
he's got
walnut.
A rotating CNC.
Yes.
That's insane.
Yeah, his stuff is just
after watching Making Fun, I want a CNC like that so bad.
Yeah.
Like seeing one in action. So cool.
Nice. All right. Dave Momfard on Instagram at Dave_things. He made this like super simple project that I thought was like the coolest thing ever. Basically, he spread paint on a manhole cover and then pressed a shirt onto it. And it was basically like guerrilla screen printing. And it was just such a simple idea that was so cool. And I think he did it in Taiwan, where there's like a story behind their manhole covers and they seem to be particular by neighborhood. But I really love like, looking at all the little insignias and things around manhole covers, and like you find a monument on a bridge or something. I think part of it was studying civil engineering, and you have to look at all those things when you're doing surveying. So being able to like capture that sort of like built up concrete beauty, I thought was really cool.
I remember seeing a company once that did that. They go around and stamp on manhole covers and stuff on t-shirts and sell them.
That's awesome. It's such a good idea. And it makes this really cool,
cool,
sort of like speckled effect. So when you hand carve a stamp and you have the imperfections from where you didn't like carve down all the way, and it just makes it look handmade. Yeah, super cool.
Yeah, and they do it like off the side of the shirt, so it's not the whole cover. So it's not just some big circle in the middle.
Cool. That's awesome.
Well, my Clampmendation this week is going to be Clarkson's Farm, which is Jeremy Clarkson from Top Gear and Grand Tour. I don't know if I'm allowed to say Top Gear. There's a big thing there. But it's essentially his like new show on Amazon. I don't know. I think it's like a year old. But he owns a farm, and it's going through the process of like trying to run a farm by himself, like from scratch, when he knows nothing about what to do.
Oh boy.
So yeah. It's really cool and really funny. Like he hires some people and stuff, and he buys this tractor that's like way too big for a farm, but he has to have the big Lamborghini thing.
That sounds just like Clarkson.
But yeah, it taught me a lot about farming, and like he talks about like how like the rain affects things, and like bugs come and destroy their crops, and like it was really interesting. He's got sheep and stuff.
Fun, nice.
Well, my Clampmendation is really a waste of time. XYZ Create made a April Fool's leather belt out of a bunch of watches, and so it's a waste of time.
Like watch bands?
Yeah. Well, it's actually all watches.
Watches.
But you said a leather belt. Are they like inlaid with the watches?
Yeah.
Nah, they're just it's not that exciting.
Just connected them all together.
You just connected them all together.
Gotcha.
They have like leather bands.
I like you just recommended him, and you're like, it's not that exciting.
Well, no, it's not as exciting as you're like
it's an April Fool's.
It's an April Fool's chip.
It's an April Fool's video. That's the point. It's not meant to be exciting. It's meant to be funny.
Yeah, waist.
Yeah,
the belt.
The pun. I like the pun. I like puns.
WAIST, not WASTE.
Yep.
Yeah. Anyways, Jokes and Morley don't get along. He doesn't get puns. It's really great.
I don't get your attempts at humor. That's what I don't get.
I don't get dad jokes.
It's not. That's the title of the video.
It's not even his attempt.
Yeah. I'm just repeating another one. Anyways, that a lot of people think is hilarious. You wouldn't get it.
You're twisting my words. I didn't say what he said wasn't funny.
No, I know. Okay, Adam, what's your Australia for those who are new listeners? this week. Adam likes to do an Australian word of the week. It's a slang word that hopefully isn't a slang word over here. And then we try and guess it. And the guest always gets to guess first. So,
Yeah.
Adam, I hope you came up with a really good one.
Okay, so first I want to ask, do you know what a beanie is?
A hat.
Like the hat?
Yeah, okay. All right, so we're going to go with Barney. Barney.
I'm assuming it's a bonnet.
Barney.
That's what I was thinking.
Oh,
No. So, I was gonna do beanie, but you know what it is, so I'm changing the word completely. I'm not doing
okay.
beanie. So it's not.
So
it's
I don't
not-
think it has anything to do with
It's not
beanie.
related at all. It's not
Okay.
related at
I'm
all.
with
No.
you. So it's a Barney.
A Barney. It's not necessarily a thing.
Gosh.
Can you spell it?
Barney.
Is it some
I
type
feel like
of?
it's something with BA. I was just gonna say I feel like it's something with BARN in it, and then you're adding EY to the end.
No.
I was going to guess it had something to
I
do
think I
with
know what it is.
food service or a waiter.
Huh.
What is your guess, Grant?
My guess is it's a generic term for a guy.
No. All right, I'll use it in a sentence. I was at the pub having a good time and I had a Barney. Ended up getting into a Barney.
Oh, like
Oh,
a
a
bar
fight? Bar fight?
Yeah, argument and a fight.
Oh.
So I was kind of right.
Wow.
It had BAR in it, and then you added knee to the end.
Well, it's not bar fight. It's just an argument or fight.
Oh, so it's not a fist fight.
It's not necessarily a bar fight. It's just a fight in general.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Okay.
So it doesn't have to take place at a bar. It's just like an argument.
No. Yes, just an argument or a fight.
Interesting. Okay, cool.
Well, I wouldn't have got that one in 1,000 years. Thanks a lot for the Adam's Australian Word of the Week. And I also want to thank TF Turning for our theme song. And I, of course, want to thank Christy for coming on. Christy, can you tell everyone where's the best places to find you?
Twisted Twine Woodworking on Instagram and YouTube. I do not have a TikTok, or I guess I technically have a Facebook, but Instagram. It's been about 1.5 years since I put a YouTube video up because there's been a few things going on in the last year, but hopefully I'll have more videos eventually coming up by the time the shop build is done.
And do you have a podcast people can find you on?
Yes, I can't believe I didn't think of that.
Everyone forgets
yes.
about their podcast. Bob did the same thing.
Making Our Way podcast. I am co-host with Dean DePlantis and Austin from High Caliber Craftsman. We release on Tuesdays, so we are the day after you guys. And so, yeah, we just hit our 1 year anniversary of doing the podcast. And anyone that's listened knows that we focus on projects. And it's been fun. It's been a learning experience. And it was, as I'm assuming you guys know too, podcasting is not as easy as I thought it was. Just sit down and just blarty, blarty, blarty. And it's a little more involved, but it's been a lot of fun. I've enjoyed it immensely.
There's a lot behind the scenes. And like imagine podcasts that have to actually do research.
Yeah.
Like proper, like they're trying to tell a story like that. It's amazing how much is behind the scenes. I thought the same thing. I'm like, oh yeah, just have a chat with some people, and then just chuck up the recording. But like, there's so much that goes into it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, on that note, now that you've told everyone where they can find you on a weekly basis, you can find all of us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube by searching Clamp and sometimes Morley Adam Grant. Sometimes that works. You know what's really funny? If you just go Clamp Grant Alexander, I don't even show up in most podcast searches. I'm like, what's happening here? Anyway, that's another thing. Thank you so much, Christy, for coming on, and thanks everyone for listening. Now to the after show.
Bye.
See you.